we're good to go.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. At least my time zone. There's some Pacific people on here, so happy Thursday. Thank you guys for joining Ravin Shah and myself for this very real discussion on recruiting. Let's do quick intros to start. For those of you that are not familiar, I'll go first. I'm Becky Real, founder of Real Home Care Consulting and Coaching. After running a independent home care agency out in the Chicagoland area for about 10 years, and growing about 300% year over year, and being named the #1 home care agency in North America by Home Care Pulse, now Activated Insights. I sold our agency last year and now help other agencies do a little bit of everything from operations, sales, marketing, recruitment, really taking an agency, a new agency. I work a lot with startups and agencies that are trying to grow revenue, and then agencies that are looking to exit. My job is to be their support system and to make this a little less isolating and a little less lonely. Because I can tell you from an agency owner perspective, this can be a lonely journey. And I'm very excited to be here with my dear friend Ravin, and I'll pass it over to you for an intro, and we'll get to this.
Awesome. Thanks, Becky. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ravin, the CEO and founder of Hellohire. I am a technology professional and entrepreneur. I guess the last 15 years I've been growing, like starting, building, scaling, and selling software companies. I've spent the last 4 years working with different industries in the hourly hiring space, and then I'd say the last year really focused deeply on home care. Becky, thank you very much for having me on your Not podcast. And yeah, really excited to talk about what's going on and just share what I've seen in home care over the last year and in hourly hiring over the last 4 years.
Yep. Perfect. So the way this is going to work is when you said not podcast, essentially I just don't, I'm not tech savvy enough to be able to put up, and I don't have the time to do a podcast, but we were talking and Ravin and I really just, and this is my whole thing, is we're really tired. I'm tired of being sold to on webinars, right? We're all tired of it. And it's this, a lot of times it's very similar content over and over again in just different words. And what I really am trying to do in this industry is expose a lot more transparency, be very raw, right? This is a very emotional industry. And no two agencies are ever going to be the same, but we all deal with the same similar issues, headaches, and we need to come together and discuss those. But I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I don't want to hide behind walls here. I want this to be very transparent. So people had sent us a bunch of questions, and we're just going to have a very open dialogue about it. And there's no filter, as you can tell from, if you were here a little bit ago, Ravin's getting pulled over story. And I just don't have much of a filter either. So we'll see where this takes us, but hopefully you'll walk away with something that will be educational and helpful to help move your agency forward. We will be recording this, and along with the recording, we will send it out along with both of our contact info if you have further questions and want to contact us. All right. Also, if you have questions or as we're discussing, feel free to type it in the chat or ask questions. We want this to be collaborative, and we want to make sure we are really getting to the bottom of your pain points. Sound good? All right. So the first question we received, and we're gonna get right into this. Ravin and I were talking earlier if we should even discuss this, and my stance on is we said nothing's off limits. We said we're really going to get into it. So again, we are not lawyers and we are not allowed to give legal advice. So remember that part of it. But the question we received is, racism is a very real and challenging issue in recruiting caregivers, whether it comes from potential clients or within the workforce itself. how can agencies better address and handle these situations? And what role do you think technology plays in reducing bias in recruiting? So we're getting right to it.
Right into the hard
Right
stuff.
into it, right into it.
Um,
Do you want to take that one, Ravin, to get started with it?
I can talk to that because again, the last 4 years I've been in HR tech. You know, DEI has been a top of mind topic in recruiting generally, right? Even outside of home care. Um, and really bias is interesting because when you think about AI, automation, and technology, um, if done poorly, can actually propagate our natural biases and make certain situations even worse. Um, the the most effective thing is to try to avoid that bias that, again, everyone is programmed with their own experiences and their own I guess internal biases. We all have them, and the question is, how do you put that aside and open up your agency and your mind to dimensions that are outside of what's normal. And I'd say that's the mindset thing. Really, you've got to open your mind and know that a profile of someone is just a box, and not everyone fits in the same box. You got to open it up, have a conversation, meet people, and really evaluate people on their skills and experience.
Right. And there's another question that very much goes in line with this that I think we can kind of play into, but many agencies encounter clients who make discriminatory requests regarding caregivers. How should agencies respond to these requests without compromising ethical standards and alienating clients? So, I mean, I personally remember dealing with that with my agency. And we can't discriminate, right? We don't want to, and we can't. However, these are human beings that we're going into their home, right? So they have every right to say what they want and what they don't want, right? So my personal opinion on that is just, and this is going to be my answer for a lot of things with what I do, but it's true. Being very transparent, right? And setting expectations goes a very long way, whether it's recruiting from a caregiver standpoint or from the client standpoint when you're recruiting, if they're giving you very limited criteria, right? Or like you're being stuck with, okay, I have to work within this frame, right? Being very transparent and setting expectations of, I understand this is the timeline we're looking at. And always the expression I would always use is just so, because a lot of people don't understand how home care works, right? A client coming to you, they don't understand how the business side works and how caregivers work, and that caregivers have other jobs and lives outside of caregiving. And I would literally have to tell people, just so you understand, our caregivers are not waiting in a closet with a number waiting to be called, right? They're human beings. They have other things, and we have to work around their schedule and what this client is requesting of us. So I think setting those expectations, somebody just chimed in. We tell people that race is not part of our matching criteria. If the client is not okay with that, then we are not the right agency for them. I love that. And I agree. And, also knowing who you are as an agency is important. Knowing what you are willing and unwilling to take on, and being okay saying no, right? It's okay to say, no, we're not the right agency for you, but let me help you. I'll send you some recommendations of some other agencies. That is perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, the only thing I could add is that, clients, do have requirements or perceive, ideas of what they want in a caregiver. And I think things like race, again, probably, not a good criteria when you're trying to find a good fit, but you may have other requirements that are, you need to be able to cook a certain cuisine or, speak a certain language in order to do the job well.
Yep.
I think it's a different story. And, I think then it's okay. And it's harder to find those very specific individuals. But but in those scenarios, I think it makes sense. Like,
Yeah. And to that point too, I remember specifically we had a caregiver from the Philippines and his client was from the US and the cooking was a really big piece, right? And I remember you want to encourage and empower your caregivers to go beyond what their the basic ADLs, right? And I remember the story of the daughter calling us crying because she was so touched that she during when the client was napping, she found the caregiver watching YouTube videos on how to cook his favorite foods. And then as their relationship grew, then they started cooking together meals that were more from the caregiver's world. And so, you know, I would always tell my clients and my caregivers too, like cooking is such an it's a social activity too. So as we grow, and I know we're kind of going off track a little bit, but this is still important. It's about connection, right? It's about really understanding where we all come from and being culturally sensitive, right? But being open-minded too. So the fact that that caregiver went a step ahead, right, and just said like, I don't do that. He was really trying, and that comes from the top down, though. That comes from the agency owners to the management and to everybody else that trickles down, right? Empowering, encouraging, being involved and giving them suggestions and ideas to help make that experience better for everybody.
True.
All right. So we have a live question that I'm going to just jump into from Paul. And I think this is something, Ravin, that you'll be able to very clearly dive into. In an industry where caregiver retention is a challenge, what actionable steps can agencies take to improve caregiver satisfaction and retention?
right. I mean, there are so many things and you can do with your active caregivers for retention. And Becky, you can speak much better to that than I can.
Yeah, I can,
Right?
yeah.
Like that's your turf.
Yeah.
Where what I can tell you is on the recruitment side, there are absolutely things that you can do that will improve like both hiring and retaining caregivers. And again, it's going to sound crazy, but speed is one of those things. And I say crazy because it's in your control, but also really hard to do. But if you are faster at engaging and meeting the right potential caregiver, you're going to hire that person that's a better profile fit for your clients, for your agencies, and what you're looking for. So speed is one of those things. The other is friction, right? And I think a lot of agencies unknowingly add friction to the recruitment process, and that usually is to filter the candidates into getting the best ones to you. Like that's the intention. The funny thing is it does the complete opposite, which that friction repels your most sought after or your caregivers that have lots of options that you may want to attract and hire. And so no friction and be super fast in your process.
What would be, when you say friction, I'm curious, like what are some examples you've seen?
Okay, so again, it's all over
Here's
the
the
place.
unfiltered part of Ravin coming out, I feel.
Well, I mean, these days, like literally anything perceived as work is friction. But I've seen, you apply for a job and then the response is complete this application form, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very common. It's like, oh, well, in order for you to go through the process, you need to fill out this form. And the forms are never fun. They're never easy. It's usually the same information that every agency is asking for.
Yep.
Nobody ever wants to do it. That's one example, right? Don't do that. Don't require someone to fill out this long form just to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
It's a turnoff. It repels people. I've seen things of like, video interviews, like record yourself answering these questions and send that to us and then, on your own time and we'll review it. Like nobody ever wants to record themselves. It's really awkward and tedious. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are a couple examples, but like that, do this test, run this assessment,
Yeah.
anything that you do
Yeah.
that is work is friction, unfortunately.
Yeah. I also feel like from a caregiver satisfaction and retention standpoint, because this is my wheelhouse, having a really strong and authentic onboarding process, right? So every agency is going to be structured differently. I'm not the person that's going to come into your organization and say, here's how you need your org chart to look, right? Because everyone has, it's all going to be very subjective, right? But the one role that I do think is critical, right? A lot of agencies have a recruiter, a scheduler. I think for smaller agencies, especially, there's a nice balance between somebody who's recruiting, onboarding, helping with the schedule. Maybe they're not fully in charge of the schedule, but because they're the one bringing the caregivers on, they have a lot of insight with who's getting onboarded, who might be a nice fit
Right.
for potential clients, right? But this person, think of it in the realm of an HR function, right? But this person is holding these caregivers' hands through that onboarding process, making sure they're having a very stellar experience. Like you want to roll out that red carpet for them, right? And check on them, not just check in on them, right? Don't just check in and say, how's the training going? But it's, how's the training going? Is there anything I can do to help you?
Right.
Right? Is there anything I can do to help push you forward? Because most of the online training platforms, you can see the progress, right? And most states, most regulated states, you need to complete a certain amount of training before you can get going. So you need to push them to get that training done. So if you just say like, where's the training? How are you building that connection, that authentic connection that's going to want them to continue to work with you, right? That's what it's about. People always think that it comes down to the pay. And that's why your caregivers are going to stay with you.
Right.
And everyone's having the same conversation in a different way right now. Yes, pay is important. Pay caregivers well. It is one of the hardest jobs out there. Pay them well, but
Yeah.
also treat them like people and
Right.
not a commodity. Treat them like you would your own. I mean, you have to change the way you view caregivers. There's so much more than caregivers. And I think that's when you're looking at caregiver satisfaction and retention, right? It's again that connection. It's building something deeper than just hours that you're having them work. Another thing you can do to improve satisfaction right off the gate is build out a mentorship program for new caregivers, right? Especially if somebody doesn't have a lot of experience, or maybe they had a bad experience with an agency.
Right.
Make sure they have somebody that is a peer of theirs that can really, they can have those very direct conversations that they're maybe not comfortable having with their supervisors yet. But having that support, right, is one way that I guarantee you they're going to have better satisfaction than an agency that's all technology all the time with no human touch. I mean, I love what Ravin's doing from an AI perspective, and it's needed. But there are some things in home care that we need people to be involved with still. So I would say those are my big things from caregiver satisfaction is really just holding their hand, make sure that we're checking in and checking on them frequently. That first week of schedule, that first week that they're with you, that 30, 60, 90-day period. And make sure that they know too, there's a lot of growth opportunity within the agency, right? But make sure that that's not just buzzwords. Show them.
Yeah.
There's other ways you can promote caregivers beyond office roles. There's head caregivers, there's mentors. There's so many other ways you can put your words behind. You can actually show that your words are meanings. Agencies say like growth opportunities, but are there really?
Yeah.
Are there really? So that's how I would say initially caregiver satisfaction and retention. And there's a lot of other ones that we can talk about. We'll probably have probably have David from Ava come on and talk about this exact topics. I think we need more, we need more than, we need an hour to talk about this. This is a big topic.
Sure.
But
Sure.
from a recruiting standpoint, that's how I would address that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just add, focusing on that kind of stuff we call high value work and activities where, put your HR recruiting person in that position and
Mhm.
spending more time doing that and less time in the sort of manual administrative sort of, low value work. So really, yeah,
Yep,
that building
absolutely.
relationships and from the beginning all the way through is critical.
Yeah, I love it. Um, all right, cool. Let's move on to the next question I got. While AI and automation can streamline recruiting, there's fear that it could dehumanize the process or even replace jobs. How do you see this playing out, and how can agencies ensure that caregivers still feel valued and supported in an increasingly automated world?
I can talk about the recruiting side. You know, AI is moving at super fast speeds, and we've made so many advancements in technology as a result of, generative AI. But, it's still technology and it's still impersonal. The day, so what, and probably not that far, but it's not tomorrow. But the day I think my answer changes is when you can't tell the difference between speaking with a human and speaking to an AI Ravine. Like, am I real? Am I fake? If you can't tell the difference, we're probably in a world where, it's a completely different game. But we're not there yet. And until that point, you really need to create that human connection and assess. Also, a big part of our job is assessing someone's fit, both from a culture point, experience, um, skills. That also, you can't rely on AI to be making those decisions for you. And so again, we're far from like what the future holds for AI, but today where you can really benefit is all of the administrative, manual, repetitive, non-human things. Let technology take care of that and really use your core asset, which is your people, to do two things. One, sell your agency to the potential caregiver. Show why you're better and different. Explain it. Sell them. Bring them on board. And then, as you said in our that previous point, build that relationship with the smaller subset of truly interested, qualified, and vetted candidates to bring, give them a red carpet experience through the rest of the process.
Yeah, like free up that side, the getting them in the door side, so you have more time to actually focus on humanizing the experience, right? So like one of my big presentations I do often is called it's about humanizing the experience. Like that's the title of my presentation. So it's something I don't think this is ever going to, I don't think we're ever going to live in the Jetsons world where um they're in this environment for what we
Yeah.
do,
Right.
right?
Right.
Caring for
Right.
people.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna have I mean, we probably love robots, but like you know, we're never gonna be in that world caring for the elderly where there's not gonna be a human element that's gonna set an agency apart. That's always going to be a big piece of what makes agencies different, exactly what you said. But when agencies, when I ask them like what makes you different, right, when I'm having those initial conversations and we're trying to build out a go-to-market strategy and really understanding, because there's hundreds, I mean, I must have 40, 50 different agencies within a very short radius of where I live, right? And I know everyone's in a very similar boat. When someone is making a decision on which agency to go with or which agency to work with, right? Money is part of it, but also it's who do I feel the most comfortable with? Who do I trust the most? Am I going to trust a robot, or am I going to trust the human being that I'm having an actual conversation with? So I don't think that AI is going to completely take over this world. I think it's going to take over a lot of the automation side, which we need, but that's in order to help free us up so we can do those little things that make a difference and set us apart.
True. Yep.
Yeah, cool. I thought this was a really interesting question. But what do you believe is the single most overlooked issue in home care recruiting that no one's talking about?
What do you think? Do you have,
Do you
yeah,
think? Um, I I think the most overlooked issue, and I wouldn't say it's an issue, and I feel like a broken record, but I think it's that connection, right? It's that, like you said earlier, like you have to hire quick. Like I can't tell you how many times we would meet somebody on the phone. They sounded amazing. The availability worked out. And I would say like, hey, listen, I know this is kind of crazy, but can you come in today?
right,
Sure. And they get over there and you just get it done, right? Because we're in the world where you just got to figure it out, right? Someone needs help, you got to just make it happen. And you do all the background checks, you do the reference checks, but you do it at like you just do it very fast. Um, but I think though what typically worked well when we would have to do that is it worked because they trusted us, right? And they trusted us because we were building that relationship. The
right,
call wasn't tell me about yourself
right,
or tell me about your caregiving experience, or when they come in or we do the Zoom, it wasn't a simple like tell me what's on your resume. It was, you have to soften it up a little bit and find
right,
that that some connection point, whether it's you grew up in the same town, or you went to the same school, or somebody from that town,
right,
whatever,
right.
something, or you visited. There's got to be some element of building that trust. And I just don't think agencies, I think we're so focused on doing this fast a lot of times that we don't put any emphasis on actually trying to get to know the person, right? We're focused on the schedule, we're focused on where they live, and we're focused on if they can physically do the job, which are all really important pieces, but there's something deeper that we should be digging in there. And I think we just overlook that quite a bit.
True. Good answer. I
Thank you.
I had so a couple of things came to my mind, and I think what threw me off is like issue. I don't know if they're issues, but like
Yeah.
some underrated things or overlooked items in recruiting. I'd say
Yeah. Agreed.
the first thing that comes to mind is, and it's related to what you said, but there's this transactional feeling that you want to avoid. And I see a lot of recruiters operating in a very transactional way, right? Question answer, question answer, question answer. Okay, we will schedule you for like, for an in-person interview. And I think that's a really tough way to get someone excited about working with you. So I think that's number one. Definitely don't be transactional in your relationships. Be real. Um,
Yeah. Be real.
be real. The other thing is the phone. So again, I think the phone is it's a great medium, but it is outdated, and you are trying to reach people at off hours, and I think the other, again, underrated thing is how difficult trying to catch someone on the phone actually is, and time consuming. I think that's another, and following the traditional recruiting process, which is very much pick up the phone and call. It's what a lot of people are finding it hard to let go of, which I think is again holding agencies back.
Yeah. I agree. The issue. I mean, if this was your question, definitely get back to us if we're missing the something here, but I very much agree with that. Okay. I would like to get into this question. Is there a disconnect between what home care agencies think caregivers want and what caregivers actually want in a job? And how do we bridge that gap?
I think for that question, you're probably the right
Okay,
person
fine.
to, yeah, I couldn't speak to that. I would
Yeah.
only have anecdotal.
So yeah, 100%. And I think that home care owners don't, the reason I love promoting caregivers to recruitment roles is because they know what incentivizes them, right? They've been there, right? And they can connect with the potential employee on so many different levels, right? And really just, really feel and talk about how the agency works. But I think agency owners oftentimes think money is all that matters. They think that, hey, we're going to pay $2 more than our biggest competitors. It doesn't matter how we treat them. We're going to pay them more. And again, pay is important, but I think culture is also becoming this like buzz. I see it everywhere on LinkedIn, and it's becoming this big buzz. I don't want to say buzzword, but buzz, subject that we keep talking about. But it's so important. Culture on social media, culture in the office, culture amongst the caregivers, right? Caregiving can be incredibly isolating, just like owning a home care agency, but caregiving itself, you're working one-on-one, maybe one-on-two with a client in their home. Maybe they're in a facility, but for the most part, they're in people's homes. And they don't have necessarily a team that they get to interact with, right? And so how do we get the caregivers to feel more of a sense of a team? And there's a lot of technologies. The technology is a great way to do that, whether it's Facebook groups or there's other groups out there, ways you can get them together, and obviously get them together for quarterly pizza parties or whatever you want to do. But building that culture and not doing it because you have to do it, like actually wanting to get to know your caregivers and know their kids' names and know what's going on with their life, because that is what is going to keep your caregivers. It's that culture that you care. It's the culture that you're being proactive. If you start to see that maybe they're calling in more than they used to, or they're running late more than you're used to, or something's off.
Right.
Don't wait until something happens. Proactively get on the phone. And I saw somebody just asked a question about phone. I agree, phone's still very important. But get on the phone, go visit them with the client, and actually, again, go beyond the schedule. What is actually going on with them? Maybe they're having a big life change, and maybe you as an owner need to proactively say, do you need some time to, sort this out? Like, don't wait for them to call in sick and lie about it. Like, get to the bottom of what's going on, build that comfortable relationship where they're comfortable talking with you, and get ahead of it. But again, it all boils down to culture, and that culture is very much top down. If the owner is not living it and breathing it, how do you expect the rest of your team to do it? And then how do you expect your caregivers to do it? And I promise you, if you have that culture that is inviting and welcoming and encouraging and all of the things that we as human beings need, your clients will see that. Your clients will feel that. And guess what, guys? That's retention. That's revenue. That's referrals. That's how you grow a home care agency. So I forgot the question, but I think I answered it. Okay, so there's just some comments about telephone still necessary. I agree. I think we live in a generation of my younger team members, I'd ask them to pick up the phone, and it's like, what? The phone? What is that? It's like, pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone and call. Let people hear your voice. I know it's uncomfortable. I know we don't leave voicemails anymore, but guess what, guys? We have to do it still. And so
I should comment on that as well, because I think I definitely go down the narrative of like phones are terrible and they suck. I should say they have a place. It is one channel. And I think what I would say is leverage your time, which is, your human capital, your time, your effort and energy on calling the right people, not everyone. And I think that's the biggest, or if you can't reach them through automation and text and emails and other channels, call the ones you don't reach through what automation can do for you. So I think I should clarify, it's absolutely a channel. It just isn't necessarily the primary channel anymore. That's really the point.
Yep.
There.
Yep. I would like to, somebody just emailed me a question, that I think is really interesting because I feel like we keep kind of going back to the same things and I want to try to get some more, let's move around a little bit. But and I don't know if you see this so much on your side, but I definitely have. Are there any red flags from a recruitment side that you've seen? So the question is, what red flags should we be looking for with potential employees? I'm happy to go, but I didn't know if you necessarily.
I can tell you what people have made red flags that haven't proven out. Like, and I've seen both sides, right? We have a number of agencies who will have a very hard no-show policy. So if you book an interview and you don't show up and you don't try to cancel or communicate beforehand,
Yep.
You're out. Like that person will no longer be considered. And so they're seeing that as a really big red flag, and it's understandable, right? This is a job where you're sending someone to someone's home, and they've got to be on time. It is a red flag. It can be, but I've seen others take a different stance of like, well, we're in this other weird world where people just do it a lot, and it's done to me by agency owners as well, right? Like it happens. There are times something goes wrong, something happens, and I think there's the benefit of the doubt that you can give an individual in that scenario and still end up making a really great hire. So
Yep.
I think I can only talk to like the red flags that are, perceived
Yeah.
as red flags that aren't always black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I 100% agree. I think from just a former agency owner standpoint, I used to be in the camp of no, you don't show up for an interview, we're done.
Yeah.
However, we're human and things do happen. And we know for the most part the mindset of a caregiver, right? It's a lot of times instant gratification and not to but I understand it too, right? If they're paycheck to paycheck and are taking care of their family and maybe their own loved ones and they're working multiple jobs, right? And they had an opportunity to pick up a shift with their other agency and make a lot more money, like they should have let you know 100%. But often, I mean, I forget things all the time. So we're human beings, right? So I would practice a little bit of grace, right? And I think that there's some situations that people deserve a second chance. If they do it again, that's a whole different story, right?
Yep.
But I think that there's oftentimes people deserve a second chance, right? And that might be a very unpopular opinion. We're all in, but there's been people that we gave a second chance to, and it worked out. And then there's been times where it didn't. So I think that's a very, you got to play it case by case. Some, things that stand out to me as red flags. There's three, I think, that I think of that I sometimes talk about with my clients. But the first is like an unclear work history. We all caregivers jump around, we know that, but it's more so if a caregiver is with an agency and they don't have hours for them, or there's continuous, well, that client was not a good fit for me. There's always an excuse why they were not working, right? We all know there's not enough caregivers out there. We know that. We know that we're all short-staffed. So if you have a caregiver that comes into you with full availability and is working with another agency, or they just have a huge gap in their schedule, I would dig. I'm not saying it's a reason not to hire anybody. I'm not saying that, and I'm never going to say that, but you want to actually dig into the details and not take things for face value. Another one that and I think Ravin, this kind of goes into what you were talking about, but like the punctuality and reliability part. So I'm very mindful of people's time, right? If I'm running late, my anxiety goes through the roof and I feel all of the things about, oh my gosh, I'm impacting their day, right? I take it very, very seriously. So if somebody's running late, the bare minimum I ask is like, let me know. Give me a quick heads up. I'm running a few minutes late. when caregivers, that is the best you're ever going to see them, is that interview, right? So if they're running late and they don't have the decency to let you know, and it's more than a few minutes, and this always irked me so much when a caregiver would come in late for an interview and they wouldn't even apologize, or they'd come in late and just, this is who I am, right?
Yeah.
That really bothered me, and that tells you something bigger though about their attitude and about their work ethic, right? And you have to ask yourself, if this is how they're going to be on your very first day of an interview, what are they going to be like with your caregiver? And I could take that to the next step too. Like, we would go through orientations and they leave garbage on the table, right?
Right.
Or they leave the office looking like a mess. What are they going to do at your clients' homes? So I oftentimes look at things that are not necessarily being said, and the way we interact. And then the third is like a lack of empathy and a lack of true desire to be doing this. We all know that this is a tough job, right? If this is a paycheck, there are a lot of easier ways to make a paycheck, guys. Like, and I tell this to agency owners all the time. There's a lot of other ways to make money. Home care is not the easiest way. So if a caregiver doesn't show that empathy and that real passion, it's sometimes like, it's something to keep an eye on. So those to me are red flags that I would always look at as somebody who is hiring for my agency. And somebody just asked, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say the crowd on this webinar probably isn't here, but some early home care agency owners that may have come from corporate or have been used to recruiting in a corporate environment would see, hey, you don't know the name of our company, what we do. You didn't do any research about us. And so early on, they're gonna feel that as a red flag. Like, how could you come here and have no idea who we are, what we do, and have done the research? I'd say again, those in the industry for a while will kind of turn a blind eye to that because it's just all too common, right? Like they're applying to not one, two, but 50, 100 agencies at a time.
Yep. Click, 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 apply. That's all and I get it.
It's hard.
I
It's a
came
hard
from
job.
corporate. I come from marketing and sales, guys. Like, I remember when I stepped into the home care agency, I remember looking at these resumes and words were spelled wrong.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not calling them. I'm like passing, it took me, it's like culture shock, right? Coming from a world where aesthetics are so important in how you're initially presenting yourself. But you have to dig deeper, and you have to also remember that oftentimes English is not their first language, right? Technology is not always their number one priority or number one strong suit. I care about empathy. I care about, are you going to take care of my clients? Are you going to show up?
Yeah.
Those are the things. So as you get going in your home care journey, you tend to focus less on that, right? Somebody asked, what if you send a reminder notice and still no call, no show? I assume we're talking about the interview and not showing up to a client's home. No, just to be clear, no call, no shows for clients, 100%. Like, there's no second chances from that. Unless, of course, there's documentation, there was a true emergency, something happened, right? Again, no call, no shows for interviews, though, perhaps devil's advocate, maybe they didn't see it. Maybe if it's going into email, maybe it went to spam. Again, technology is not their strong suit. Maybe last minute they got offered that additional shift with their current client and they're not thinking straight. So I still think there's a world where you can give these people a second chance one time. But one time.
Yeah. And they need to ask for it or want it. And I think in those cases it's warranted.
Yeah. And you have to keep track of those things too. So whether it's a Google Doc with an Excel, or you keep track of it in your CRM or EVV, you have to keep track of these things. You have to keep track of people you've interviewed and you can talk, you know, with Hellohire's back end, but like if you're not keeping, because I'm sure also you're seeing the same people applying over and over again, right? You see that name and you're like, oh, not again. Or it's even caregivers that currently work for you, right? And they're applying to work, right? Because they're applying for every single job because they just want to work, right? But I think there's, you know, you got to take it case by case, I think is just bottom line there. All right, so we have about 10 minutes, and I know Ravin and I could just chat all day long, and we go on tangents, and so I want to try to get through a few more of these that I think we haven't really touched on. And if this is helpful and you like this and we get your feedback, we can do another session with more of these questions, because we had about 30 questions that were sent to us, so I'm doing my best to make it through. Okay, let me see here. There's so many good ones.
And if
Can
anyone
you,
has one burning inside your head right
yeah, I
now,
mean,
put it in
I
the
would love
chat.
to answer some
Yeah.
live ones too, so we can kind of go back and forth, but let me do this one while people are thinking of questions. All right, so can you share an example of a home care agency that completely revamped its recruitment process? What were the key changes and the outcomes? And I mean, you work a lot with, do you have an example off the top of your head?
I mean, the one that, comes to the top of my head is Bob Roth and Cypress Home Care. I mean, I think Bob and team have really reimagined what this entire process could look like, and really leveraged probably the best of technology and the best human interactions to pull people through the funnel and get great high quality caregivers on the other side. So I'd say, and without diving into too many of the details of what that actually is, high level, it's automate what can be automated, and really, number one, start with the why. Get that empathy, the reason why they're in this industry to begin with. That is number one, the most important thing. Beyond that, go into skills, experience, and sort of the tactical things. Make onboarding, credentialing so easy that it's a joy to do it, and just pull people through that funnel very quickly. So I'd say they come to mind as really forward thinking, and have seen unbelievable results, right? Like in 6 months, I think they went from 40 active caregivers to 150 with no additional office staff, no, just within the existing internal team support. To be able to grow at that rate is just, it's unreal.
Yeah.
So that was,
We're gonna try to plow through a few more of these, because I think this is a really interesting one. And this is more of an opinion, do you think the recruiting crisis is a symptom of the larger systematic problems in the home care industry? And if so, where should agencies focus their efforts first? So I will just share though, because I know Ravin's been in a lot of different industries and has landed really focusing on home care, right? Because of the need. But I remember 10 years ago that we were not in a much different space. So everyone keeps talking about the this problem we're in, this short work, COVID caused this limited shortage of hourly employees, but it's not, it's everywhere, right? But I remember this was always an issue. I think the issue is more that people now understand that they're in need, right? They're more willing and vocal about their wants and needs. And they know that they can go anywhere, right? And work. So I think it's more of a retention issue and more of a culture issue, more so than a recruiting crisis, right?
right.
I mean,
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
I mean, I agree completely, and this was a focus of my work over the last four years, because after the pandemic, everyone felt like that was the cause of this labor shortage, and everyone left industry and moved to or nobody wanted to work was the other common thing I'd hear. But this labor shortage has been growing year over year for over 10 years. And the reason it felt so impactful after the pandemic is because a lot of people for that uncertain time were holding on to whatever job they had. And then as soon as sort of a year afterwards, that path has been linear and growing year after year. So the supply is an issue, and it's not gonna get bigger. We're not gonna create new supply overnight, and the demand is still gonna be there. So you really have to work with these restrictions. With this is the world you live in and operate in, and you have to adapt to it. And honestly, out compete outrun your competition. Be better, be faster, be care more, and you're gonna win.
Yep.
You're fighting
Be
for the same pool of people.
exactly. Be the agency that is, and this is what I work on with my clients, is there's dozens of agencies. Caregivers can go to any agency. Clients can go to any agency they want. Be the agency that has already built the trust in the community. So when the time comes that somebody needs help or somebody needs a job, it's just a no-brainer because you've already done the hard part, right? So when you're marketing or you're recruiting, go focus on your community, right? That's where it's at, because you're not trying to attract people from other states and countries like this. We're not selling boots and purses, right? We're selling services very localized. And that's where we need to be focusing a lot of our energy in what we're doing. Cool. All right. So I think this is probably a good one to end on. In your opinion, how can agencies balance speed and efficiency in recruiting with finding the right cultural fit long-term retention?
I mean, it's gonna sound easier than it is, but meet more potential caregivers, make it easy for them, and find the ones that fit what you're looking for um, quickly. And again, I'd say that this, and I've seen this come out in various studies in the industry, but that speed is your best friend, and really leverage your speed, but do the due diligence, spend the time so you're pulling the right people through. Just open the gates a bit more. I'd say, would be my advice there.
And I also think listen to your gut, right? Don't spend the time with people that you know are not going to represent your agency, right? I would rather have told a client it's going to take us about a week to get going than to place somebody that was going to make us look bad or was potentially going to put the client at risk or my agency at risk or even fellow caregivers. So again, back to someone's point earlier, it is okay to say no. It is empowering to say no. I remember, as we grew as an agency and really defined who we were, right? We were this boutique, high-end agency, but that didn't happen overnight. It took us time to learn who we were and who we wanted to serve and who we wanted to hire. And once you understand that, and you can say, you know what? No, we don't do live-in, or we don't go to that town because that's too challenging,
Right.
right? It is actually so much more liberating. And it really, you feel the weight off your shoulders. You physically feel it. And so I think that's okay to really embrace who you are and know that you're not going to be everything for everybody. And that's perfectly fine. There's enough out there for everybody, right? There's enough business out there. It's only going to get busier. And so embrace it, right? Well, we are at the top of the hour. I am gonna just close this out unless you have anything else on that you wanted to chime in on.
Oh, just the power of no, I think, is a great place
Yeah,
to end.
yeah.
It's liberating.
So yeah, I love home care, guys, is it's an industry unlike any other. I love it, but I love having these very direct conversations, especially when they're a dear friend of mine. It just makes it so easy. But we need to be talking about I feel like I just got your Canadian accent about. We need to be talking more and sharing more and not be afraid to ask these really hard questions. So I encourage you, follow up with us if there's something that we did not get to that was one of your questions. I am available. I know Ravin's available. We will send this out with our contact info. If there is a topic that you would like us to do, or I'm going to be doing more of these with different subject matter experts that we're going to be really digging into. I mean, this last name is great, right? With real topics that are really impactful, but ultimately we want to make a difference in your agency and we want to be able to help you find that balance along with the growth. So I thank you for being a part of this today. You can expect the email by tomorrow at the latest. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, Ravin, for being here and adding the comedic relief that we so badly need in our lives.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks everyone for spending your time with us. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great week, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.